Hear this first. You are not broken because your life required more than one rebuilding. You're not behind because you had to start again after you promised yourself the last time you were already done hitting reset. You're not weak because your resurrection did not happen once according to your neat plan. Blessing chosen ones, I am Queen the Crown Oracle. Stay to the end of this short transmission from Spirit for you, because what you're about to hear will change how you understand your repeated ending forever. Not every restart is punishment, and not every reset is from failure, and not every time all hell broke loose was proof that you did something wrong. Collapse is never the end of your calling. Sometimes collapse is the clearing before your next assignment. Sometimes the structure falls because it could no longer hold the truth of who you are unfolding into. And sometimes what feels like devastation is simply the moment you can no longer remain loyal to what was already dead. This transmission is for the cycle breaker who has rebuilt their life more than once and would prefer to stop being told that it's their superpower. For the one who has had to gather themselves after collapse, after loss, after betrayal, after grief, and after being emptied out by people, by systems, by timing, and by lessons they did not ask for, but were still required to endure. This because the spiritual lie they program us to believe is that abundance living automatically means blessing without alignment, that if you are strong enough or truly aligned, you should not have to start over again, and that repeated collapse is proof that you are failing, or that pain can be turned into praise without naming the cost it demands from your body, your nervous system, your peace, and your time. The tomb programming was so you keep calling every challenging ending a lesson without admitting that some endings were wounds, and that lie keeps cycle breakers trapped in silence, shame, and self doubt. The crown oracle truth is that the life divinely guiding you to your royalty, your true kingdom, is refined through your return, not through linear progress. The collapse is meant for clearing from chaos to order. The path from crucifixion to resurrection is not cute or tidy. It can be very uncomfortable and unfriendly. Know that starting again is sacred even if it hurts. Know that if something dies in one season, it was the exact structure that could not carry your next shift. Your repeated rising is not proof of brokenness. Instead, it is proof that your spirit refuses to stay buried. We live in a world that ensures harsh language around refining the spirit, where the focus is placed on deluding us to believe every form of survival is actually a blessing. Without sharing, it is necessary to trust the process. It allows you to share your finished testimony, but ignores the trembling hands that had to write it or your trembling voice that had to declare it. It will point out to you you are so strong, when what it really means is, I do not know, or care to know, or willing to hold what happened through you. So instead, I will turn your pain into praise so it becomes easier to move on. And that is where many cycle breakers get trapped. You are praised for surviving what you would have preferred never to have had to endure. You are admired for what appeared meant to destroy them. You are told what you suffer if you survive makes you stronger. Meanwhile, no one sits long enough with the real cost to you, to your unfolding, from the burial through repeated fire, where many, from being tired or disappointment, be turned into martyr. There is a difference between being resilient and being repeatedly required to endure what should have been prevented. There is a difference between strength from our natural birthright alignment and strength that forms because you had no other option than to pick yourself up. There's a difference between a testimony that came from wisdom and a testimony that came from exhaustion. And if you have lived long enough inside repeated beginnings, seasons in the belly of whales, you know the difference in your bones. You know what it means to start over when you are finally beginning to feel safe. You know what it means to rebuild after making peace with one life, only to be asked to continue the journey and to release this version again. You know what it means to look at your own history and realize that the pattern is not random. For you, it is structured, it is orchestrated, it is ancestral, it is spiritual. It is the season where you keep being asked to function while still grieving, to smile while still disoriented, to stay practical while your inner world is collapsing into pieces no one else can see. And it is asking to be seen without being romanticized. To the empaths who feel everything long after everyone else has gone numb and were told you feel too much, to the black sheep who never fit the family script, who keeps being cast as a problem simply because your spirit was built to interrupt the pattern, to the narcissist survivor who kept trying to love people into being safe, who learn that love without safety becomes hard labor and that giving away unearned attention without guardrails becomes access for another wound. For the fire signs who were born with ignition in their bones, who were made to burn bright, live bravely, and survive intensity that others would not dare imagine but were blamed for burning, when others keep pouring gasoline in dry places and expecting water from you. And to the real chosen ones, the ones who kept surviving what was meant to crush them, the ones who had to start over and still refuse to become bitter, the ones who can now see that repeated cycles in resurrection are not proof that they are broken. It is proof of your appointment with legacy. This is a big reason why it hurts you so deeply, because you were never dealing with random pain. You have been traversing a coronation through fire. This message is for you because repeated resurrection is often the life of the one's source intended not to merely survive in false environments. You're not broken simply because you will not keep pretending. You are not dramatic because your body remembers what your mind is trying to outrun. You are not unstable because your nervous system refuses to call harm home. You are the one who notices what others deny, the one who feels, what others suppress, the one who will no longer make peace with being diminished in the name of belonging. If you're ready to reconnect to your birthright abundance blueprint, type kingdom or drop a crown emoji in the comments. Subscribe, follow, and join your crown tribe. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss these transmissions from Spirit for you. Chapter 1, the Earth School Lesson Plan. The lesson is the crucifixion stage. It does not feel inspirational while you're inside it. You pretend to stay practical while your inner world collapses into pieces no one else can see. It feels confusing and lonely. It feels like being asked to cross a river while learning how to swim in real time. This is where many cycle breakers are forged, hidden in cycles where they push through anyway. They make calls they do not feel ready to make when they release what no longer fits, where they sit with the grief long enough and learn to stop lying about it. When they stop asking whether the old thing can be revived and begin asking whether it was ever meant to be. Chapter 1 is where the false self faces the myth of the meant for survival superpower starts to break down. Because people love to call your survival powerful when they do not have to live inside it. They listen to hear the distance traversed, the summary, the love. They love the aesthetic of a person who went through hell and still stand tall. But do they always care about the practical reality of what it takes to stand back up after each collapse? The missed sleep, the tightened chest, the silenced mornings? How about the therapy sessions, the prayers, the confusion? What about the reorganization of your entire identity? The way you must learn your own language again after being spoken over for too long. This is where they treat it like a caption, the labor pains, the grief work, while for you, that was soul maintenance. And this is why chapter 1 should never be minimized, because before there is clarity, there is often disorientation. Before there is clear vision, it's often preceded by a blankness that feels like failure. Before you choose peace, there is usually a raw confrontation with what has ended. And if you are the kind of person who has had to resurrect multiple times, you know that the first burden is not just rebuilding your life. It starts with rebuilding your relationship from courage. It is deciding, do you trust nature again after life so far has asked so much from you? Now using discernment to guide whether the next version of you can remain soft without purity mistaken for naivety. It is deciding to keep your heart open without making itself available to what is already proven unsafe. That is why resurrection costs so much, not because you're weak, but because every real rising requires release. You cannot carry the old version of your life and the next version of your life at full weight together. Something must be laid down, must be surrendered. Something must be named truthfully so it can stop running its programming in your life from the shadows. Many times, what must be released is a person. It definitely will include a false identity. Oftentimes, it is releasing a dream that was never actually yours. Sometimes it is the belief that you must keep proving your worth through endurance. For many, it is the addiction to being needed. It includes releasing the fantasy that if you remain loyal enough to pain, pain will eventually reward you. It will not. Pain is not a mentor that rewards loyalty. It is a signal from your vessel, and when the signal stays on for too long, it no longer remains just a signal. It can extend to the structure around it. Chapter 1 is the season of unconsciousness, the season where the old life is gone, but the new one is not yet fully taken shape. It is where you are expected to keep functioning while in crucifixion, while being sent to tombs. It is moving through Earth's school lessons that strip away comfort before it recalibrates to the understanding. The season where you smile while still disoriented, where you keep breathing all while you're still inside the belly of the whale, where the losses keep stacking high like waves, where the pattern feels cyclical because the lesson has not yet been fully seen. Chapter 1 is not where clarity lives. Chapter 1 is where surrender becomes unavoidable. It is where the false life falls apart deeply enough for the truth to begin pressing through. Chapter 1, when the superpower language breaks down, it is where you stop pretending the collapse was random. Because once the unconscious begins to lift, you can see that many of your losses were connected to the same hidden architecture, the same pattern, the same tolerance that's the same tolerance for what should have ended sooner, the same habit of staying too long because you believe loyalty will be the asset that gets you to your destiny. Here you fight with the familiar urges to keep carrying what was never yours to carry. This is why chapter 1 feels like nailed to the cross crucifixion. Something in you is being put to death before you know how to rise again. Chapter 2, alignment with your birthright blueprint, you choose living from blessings. This is your resurrection. Chapter 2 is where your awareness comes back online, where the truth reveals the missing awareness. Chapter 2 is where you stop glorifying the collapse and start examining the conditions that made collapse necessary. It is where you outgrow the survival infrastructure that could no longer hold your kingdom, your crown, or life captive. It is where you ask sovereign questions. Why did I get to rebuild from this kind of damage again? What have I ignored? What did I keep overriding inside myself? Where did I confuse loyalty with self abandonment? Where did I call endurance faith when it was simply really fear? Where did I keep offering access to people or patterns that had already proven themselves unsafe? Chapter 2 is about radical self acceptance. It is about integration to finally let the true you, the royal version, out. It is about assessing the lessons of past wounds and extracting the wisdom. This is the part many people skip because it does not feel glamorous. Many want rebirth without the examination. They want the benefit of sporting the crown without the cost. They want the testimony without the test inventory. Know this. You cannot build your abundant life from the same unhealed assumptions and expect a different outcome. At some point, the assignment becomes less about surviving the breakdown and more about understanding why the breakdown kept having access to your life. That is where boundaries become sacred and where discernment becomes non negotiable. That is where peace becomes more valuable than being understood by people committed to misunderstanding you. That is where your life starts to change for real. A lot of people feel ashamed to call this period starting over, as if that phrase should make you feel small. But starting over is not always a regression. Sometimes it is the first honest move you have made in years. Sometimes it is the moment you stop building on unstable ground just because you are tired of moving. Sometimes it is the moment you choose truth over appearance. It might be the moment you say, I would rather begin again in alignment than continue in a life that looks like linear investment but keeps costing your spirit. That is not failure, that is wisdom, that is maturity, that is the end of self betrayal disguised as commitment. And yes, it can feel humiliating at first because you know what it is to have already done the work. You know what it is to have healed or to put effort towards healing or healed enough to believe the next chapter had finally arrived. Then life shifted. Then the relationship changed. The family pattern surfaced again. The body got tired. The job ended. The support disappeared. Then the thing you thought was stable revealed its cracks. And you get to start over with more awareness than before, which can sometimes feel harder than starting from nothing. Because now you can see what might be broken more clearly. You can feel the cost more deeply. Here, you can no longer blame ignorance. You know, you now have the knowledge, and that knowledge can feel heavy before it feels freeing. But this is also where your power becomes refined. Because the second, third, and fourth rebuilding does not create the same person who rebuilt the first time. Each resurrection gives you a sharper eye, a quieter ego, a steadier yes, a clearer no, a deeper relationship with your spirit actually is calling to remain alive. A deeper relationship with what your spirit is actually calling to remain alive. You stop mistaking intensity for intimacy, familiarity with safety. You stop mistaking attention for care and associating pressure with building purpose. You stop accepting the bare minimum as evidence that you should stay, and that is when your life begins to separate itself from the old program patterns. Many bypassers expect the easy version of your story. They keep shrinking the story down to what others can easily digest. They want to connect to your resilience to keep fueling pity parties. They want to say you are so strong, just like me, as though strength alone without healing is the ceiling. But strength and endurance is not the full story. Endurance without healing becomes a way to avoid self-compassion. Endurance without honesty becomes a way to romanticize harm. And endurance without repair becomes a way to keep expecting people to validate them, surviving what could have been transformed long before it reached this stage. So let it be said plainly, you should not have had to display this strength just to remain intact. And if you had to, that is evidence of how much you overcame, not evidence that the pain was holy. Real chosen one, cycle breakers carry both strength and trust at the same time. Trust because they overcame what many did not see. They know how much of themselves had to be spent just to keep going. They trust because there is a return in rebuilding. Endurance because they had to rebuild more than once. Trust because they know how to begin again. Endurance because beginning again is not the same thing as being restored to rest. There is a difference between being potential and being well. This difference is between having capability and being free. And for your resurrection, you invest in the rebuild as you no longer confuse those things. Now you choose. Stay loyal to the identity many bypassers stay devoted to as they live from the beliefs starting over means shame, or keep resurrection like proof, or they keep treating resurrection like proof of damage, or the path of chosen one cycle breaker who allows the truth that starting over is sometimes the most honest expression of self-respect. Real cycle breakers begin seeing it as proof of durability, discernment, and divine existence. They tell themselves the truth about the cost and honor the magnitude of what it took to keep unfolding. Your ancestors shed tears in prayers for your presence here, because many of the people who keep having to start over are not only carrying their own losses, they're carrying inherited losses, unspoken grief, repeated abandonment, generational instability, family systems built on silence, loyalty tests, and emotional survival. You may be the first one in the line to say no. I will not continue this in the same form. No one before you refused the old coping strategies that kept everyone alive but kept nobody free. You are the first one to break the cycle by choosing the kind of rebuilding that includes truth, care, structure, and self-respect. Your repeated resurrection is not just personal, it is ancestral. It is a bloodline being interrupted. It is a pattern being named. It is a lineage being protected. That is why your presence here feels unexplainably sacred, even if it feels exhausting. You're not just surviving for yourself. Your steps are demonstrating it is possible to stop calling chaos normal. Your actions are showing that a person can begin again without betraying the bloodline. You're proving that healing is a necessary and courageous process of reclaiming your peace. It rewrites trauma programming from hacked blueprints. It stops cycles of pain from projecting onto others. It allows you to rewrite your own story without being defined by past hardships. You are proving that Leaving old structures is true alignment for internal freedom. Healing, reconnect, your kingdom awaits. Let's reign together, Crown Tribe. Namaste.